The Fundy North Fishermen's Association is an association which takes care of fishermen through southwestern New Brunswick. We're sort of the advocates for the fishermen for any of their needs. We provide lobster tags. We also handle any issues that come up with licensing. I'm the assistant director for the Fundy North Fishermen's Association, and my main roles are to manage the projects that we have on the go, such as the Ghost Gear Retrieval project. Ghost gear occurs when fishing gear is lost at sea, primarily lobster traps and ropes in the Bay of Fundy. Whether from bad weather, broken lines, or ships inadvertently cutting through the gear or accidentally dragging gear away when it gets caught in their propellers. When this gear is on the ocean floor, it can snag active gear during the fishing season. When that happens, it pulls the active gear down, and when the fishermen try to pull it back, the lines break due to the strain of the added weight, and they lose their active gear, thereby creating more ghost gear. As the ghost gear collects more and more gear, with the tides and currents depending on where it is, it can create a tumbleweed effect, which means the gear starts rolling around on the bottom with the currents and catching more and more gear as it goes, thereby creating huge snarls of gear. The term ghost gear is applied because when this gear is on the ocean floor, it continues to fish, but unfortunately no one can tend the gear to get the marine life out. Lobsters and other marine life go into the traps but can't get out again, thus becoming bait for others to do the same. This can continue indefinitely for many years unless the traps are found and recovered through ghost gear retrieval. The lost ropes present a serious hazard as well, as they can entangle marine life, causing serious injury or eventually death if the marine life can't break free. This is especially concerning in our area because of the endangered North American right whale, which frequents our waters. No fisherman wants to see any marine life harmed or killed because of ghost gear. The Ghost Gear Retrieval Program is a program that began in 2008. The fishermen came to Fundy North because they realized they were starting to lose a lot of gear to old gear that was on the bottom of the ocean. The gear would get snagged in with the derelict gear, and when they tried to retrieve it themselves with the grapples they carry aboard their boats, the lines would snap. The fishermen were concerned with the fact that this could cause a detriment to the lobster population, which could affect their incomes, as well as harm to marine life that could get tangled up in the old gear on the bottom. Our Ghost Gear Retrieval program has been very successful. We first started from 2008 to 2015. One of our fishermen actually designed the grapples, Reed Brown from Deer Island, and we still use those grapples today. Our best indication that this was a success was when the fishermen came to us to let us know they were no longer losing gear to traps in the areas where we had done retrievals. We've begun another Ghost Gear program effective in 2020. Kalen Brown would be our youngest retriever, and he has been doing phenomenally well, and he tends to come in with some pretty high numbers of gear.
I've been doing ghost gear retrievals now 3 years. It's important to do ghost gear retrievals because of to get the mess off bottom and for sea life, and just so it doesn't create more mess on bottom as well.
The areas that we do most of our ghost gear retrieval, where we find most of the gear, would be Harbour Passage, Passamaquoddy Bay, and St. Andrews Bay. Our most experienced retriever to date would be Greg Beckerton.
I started doing ghost gear retrieval because I started noticing that I was finding a lot of old gear snarled in my crab gear. I think ghost gear retrieval is important to do to, one, get the bottom cleaned back up again, and two, to keep it cleaned up, because it does happen, like fellas try their best to try and find their gear. Sometimes you can't find it. And all these traps that are on bottom are still fishing even after their bios are gone. So it gives a chance for everything that gets caught in the trap to get out when we retrieve it. And if we retrieve it, then it's not fishing. To do ghost gear retrieval, the gear we need to use is a grapple with hooks on it. With any size grapple, you need a boat that's geared up for deep water dragging, like a scallop dragger. Like I'm geared up with a big winch that holds 200 fathom of cable, the A-frame, a boom, heavy duty boom with a boom winch, and a good sized trap hauler.
The reason we need heavy duty gear is because some of the stuff we get into is heavy and big and just can't do it with light gear. Some grapples work better in different areas, lighter, heavier. If it's muddy bottom, then they tow easier. If it's rock bottom, then they tow a lot harder. The grapples work by towing them across bottom, and they hook ropes and traps and whatever else they run into on bottom.
And usually in deep water, you're not just getting one trap, you're getting a trawl or multiple traps, and that can be kind of hard to lift up. The grapples actually work by, when they're traveling across the bottom, grabbing the ropes more than the traps. With float rope, it's floating up off bottom, so it gives us a better chance to catch. And the rope's usually trailing away from the trap, so you have a better chance of snagging it. Depending on how much cable you let out will determine on how far back they are, but I usually fish about 3 to 1, so for every fathom of water I have underneath me, then I'll put 3 fathoms of cable out. And so they are quite a ways behind me.
1.5 to 1 is better for catching just like single traps with no ropes on them. That was just pure luck. One day we had 1.5 to 1. We went some deeper water, and I just kept it going, and we pulled it back and had a single trap. And I tried it again, and another tow, and we had the same thing, but I figure it's because the bar is up off bottom further, and it's just the grapples going.
To keep track of where our grapples are at, I usually watch which way the cable is leading away from my boat. Like if it's off to my port side, then I know that my grapples are on the port side of the boat more than they are in the middle, or vice versa. I can usually tell when something gets on the grapples when I have to start using more power to maintain my speed.
The boat slows down, might come to a halt if we got a big bunch, or it might just slow down just a hair if there's only a trap or 2 on it. I usually tow them for like a maximum of 10 minutes, just in case you do have a line. If you tow it much longer than that, you might part it off. I always find shorter is better.
And you might not notice the strain of just one trap, as opposed to the strain of 5 or 6 or more. I guess I like to tow slow, because I figure if I'm towing, the faster you tow, the more chance you have to haul your grapples clear of bottom instead of just having them trickle across the bottom.
We're scalloping, we tow about 2 knots, so I tow the grapples about 2.5 knot.
As the grapples go across bottom, they'll rattle and shake, and the vibration will loosen the pins up. Fellows have had them fall out, and then you end up missing a grapple. To make sure we don't lose the grapples off the bar, I use shackles with either weld the pins in them, or I take the pins out, throw them away, and put bolts with locking nuts and double nut them.
Finding ghost gear is a very difficult enterprise. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Fishermen do this through instinct and knowledge of the waters and the currents, and how, if gear is cut off, which way it would go. They also have the knowledge of other fishermen who've lost gear in those areas.
The best search pattern for grappling would be doing like a grid, side to side, up and down. You can cover more ground, more area. If it's shallow water, then the drags are probably right underneath you, but if there's deeper water and you run out more cable, it might be behind you a little ways further.
I'll tow a straight line, and then I'll just set either one side of the line or the other, and travel the the same toe, but just, a little off to the side of it, and then just keep working my way one way, and then I'll go, and where my first toe was, I'll just go just the other side of that and work my way, do the same thing on the other side of it. And if after, a bunch of toes I haven't seen anything, then I'll move to somewhere else to try and find something before the day's over.
In order to do ghost gear retrievals of the type that we do in deep water with heavy currents and the rugged grapples, you need to be an experienced fisherman who knows what to do on the water. This can be very dangerous because of the tides and the currents. In addition, high winds and rough water can cause the boat to rock in the waves, and the grapples can swing back and forth erratically. The fishermen have to be careful that they don't get their feet caught in the ropes, because if the line snaps with a snarl of traps and rope on the grapples, then that snarl is going back overboard, and the fisherman is going with it. It's crucial to have knives handy in all locations to be able to try and cut the lines free should something happen.
One of the dangers of doing retrievals would be, well, if you're in a big snarl, got trawls or anything, it's that there's a lot of strain on stuff. And if there's rope on deck and it lets go, and anybody gets snarled up in it and goes overboard, there's no buoy or anything on it to get anybody back, like there would be in regular season, where there'd be a balloon or buoy on it. I always try to make sure that any extra rope that we have that we've pulled aboard, we usually try to cut clear and keep an eye on everybody. That way that if it does let go and goes overboard, the big pile of rope that we're standing on, we don't get tangled up in it.
When you're out in the current or the tides are a little rough, the boat's rocking, those grapples rock back and forth quite heavily. The bars themselves of the grapples we use are over 300 pounds of solid steel. There's usually 3 grapples on each bar, and each of those grapples are 150 pounds plus of solid steel. If that hit a fisherman, it could cause serious injury or knock them overboard. When the fishermen are out doing retrievals in areas that are considered more dangerous, or that they may need assistance if they get large snarls of gear, they tend to go with more than one boat for the safety factor. This came into advantage one day when Greg Beckerton was out doing retrievals and his hydraulic hose let go. Another fisherman was nearby, Darren Brown, who had hoses and managed to go to his assistance to give him hoses and clamps to get Greg on his way again.
To figure out what a good day to go is, weather for one thing. With rough weather, the more your boat's rolling around, the harder it is to get your grapples to 10 bottom, because the grapples are independent of each other and they're hard to work around when they get swinging around.
When it's slatty out, you get the grapples up in the air and they're slatting back and forth, and it's dangerous.
Tide is the biggest thing. If you know you're having the full tides, then your chances of getting anything are a lot lower. The best time of tide to do retrievals would be when the tide is slack or not running as hard. Like when the tide's running the hardest, it seems to be harder to actually grapple. The depth of water I've worked anywhere from 5 fathoms to 55.
To locate gear in a specific location, if we're in an area and the tide's running like north to south, for example, we'll try to tow across the tide from east to west, because the way the gear, people run out the gear, they'll run it with the tide. So if we tow across the tide, there's a better chance of catching the rope. Usually if we're caught on bottom, if I can't get it up one direction, I let the cable go and I swing back around on it and try towing it on tow it the opposite direction I was towing. See if it will break clear, and 9 times out of 10 it usually does.
Once the retrieval day is done and the boat comes back to the wharf after 8 to 10 hours of retrieval work on the water, the gear has to be hoisted out onto the wharf, loaded onto trailers, and traps which are not reusable are taken to be recycled and turned into other metal products. Traps that are reusable and have tags on them that can identify the owners are returned to the owners. Doing this work can easily turn an 8 to 10 hour day into a 14 to 16 hour day, which again shows the dedication of the fishermen who volunteer to do ghost gear retrieval work. Our fishermen are amazing individuals to take the time to go out and do this sort of work on a volunteer basis, because they're risking their own well-being, they're risking their vessels, they're risking their income, their livelihood to do this work. But it means so much to them in order to be able to protect the environment and as well their way of life. And we, as Fundy North and any other association who does ghost gear retrievals, could not do the work that we do without these fishermen behind us volunteering to help.